So we're standing here together today. She's my new best friend. So yeah, we're not about hate. We're all about peace and love. Okay, over to you, Abigail.
Hi, thanks, Harry. I'm a bit nervous and also really jet lagged. I just came from there actually. I spent about 10 days in Israel and Palestine, so forgive me if I stumble. Oh yes, I'm a bit short as well. Because I'm super jet lagged, it's 12 hours behind and also 20 degrees hotter. But kia ora, ahlan wa sahlan, shalom to everyone here. I'm really privileged to be asked to speak. So as Debbie said, I'm Abigail and I'm one of the co-founders actually of Dayenu. We are a Jewish organisation for Jews who are against the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land and lives. Firstly, I would like to repeat my thank you to everyone who came here today. It really means a lot to be invited here to speak, more than you'll probably ever know. Because I actually grew up in a region amongst a lot of violence, the death of family members, and fear, ever constant fear. When I moved, can someone help me with this, by the way, I'm quite short. I standing like this, by the way, this is what I'm about. That's better, thank you so much. Okay, that's better. So I would say I like to thank everyone. When I moved here, I was about 4 years old. I, like many left-wing Jews and Israelis living in the diaspora, was faced with ostracism and abuse from my community when I expressed resistance to Israel's violent policies. Sometimes I actually really feel completely hopeless, like nothing will ever change, and that I would do better just to give up the fight and stay in New Zealand with my head down. But actually standing here today, gathered amongst friends and comrades who have kept up the fight for a really long time, for years, time and time again, without losing any resolve, I'm filled again with hope that we can build a real and sustainable future for both our peoples. So as I said, I actually got back from Israel-Palestine just a week ago. I left on the Friday morning that the crisis actually began, but you could really tell that the tension has been building for quite some time. The feeling was really bad. I was in Jerusalem. I didn't manage to go to the old city because I thought it would be best to avoid it. But the feeling is really bad there. We went to the West Bank. Our friends took us to Nablus to eat a lot of food and see some friends. And we went through the checkpoint just fine. My mum just lied and said she went to visit someone at a settlement. But my friends who are Palestinian citizens of Israel from Nazareth, they had to go through a different checkpoint, and they had a harder time than we did. The security measures were tighter, restrictions have been stepped up, and this is really the context in which this Al-Aqsa crisis has been happening. This occupation has been going on for 50 years, and violence really explodes as restrictions on Palestinians' lives are increased. So we definitely felt it while we were there. When I'm doing this work, I often think about who I can speak to and who I can speak for when I speak about the occupation. I can list Israeli crimes against humanity and atrocities against Palestinians for hours, maybe even days. But the truth is I'm Israeli and I am the occupier. Even though I have a really hard time, I can never really understand what it's like to live under occupation. I will never really grasp what it feels like to live day to day without with my basic rights stripped away from me, all because I was fortunate enough to be born on the right side of the fence. But I do know what the regime is doing to us, because for as long as there is occupation, Israelis too will never truly be free. Such a massive project of systematic, institutional and unnecessary violence will only create more violence. Our leaders continue to push policies of occupation and apartheid, claiming it is in our self-defense, while in reality it is ordinary Israelis like me that face danger and death as a result. For decades, we have been accumulating so many preventable tragedies. My grandfather died in the Six-Day War of 1967 when my mother was only 5 years old, and he genuinely believed what the state told him, that we were fighting in self-defense, that fighting would secure his family, his daughter and his grandchildren, a real future. But instead, we annexed the West Bank and Gaza, and this is not what he fought for. And those territories have been besieged ever since. It's been 50 years since he died and nothing has changed. Children still grow up without their fathers, their brothers, their sisters. How unacceptable and irresponsible for our leaders to continue this violent status quo. I shouldn't have grown up in fear. Fear of being killed. Fear of my family and friends being killed. Fear for my friends forced into military service against their will. No 18-year-old should have a gun forced into their hands. No 18-year-old should be forced to kill innocent civilians. Every week, my friend has to drag herself out of bed in a cold sweat and absolute dread to bus from Tel Aviv to the West Bank so she can protect the violent Jewish fundamentalists who live in the settlements in the West Bank, while her family sits at home worrying. She, like so many ordinary Israelis, she doesn't want to be there. We don't want to be there. She doesn't want to be an occupier, an oppressor, or a jailer. But her only other option is jail time if she refuses. And a lot of my friends, actually have sat in prison because they refuse to fight. Other forms of meaningful resistance are also illegal for Jews and Israelis. Today it is illegal to hold a public seminar or lecture on the Nakba of 1948, where 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from the region. This is the cause of the current Palestinian refugee crisis. It's an event, it's part of my history, and I'm not even allowed to learn it. It's an event that's so crucial to the current situation, and we're not allowed to hear any information about it. And say what you want about BDS, but it's a non-violent movement, and just recently BDS activists were barred from entering Israel. An American rabbi who publicly supports this non-violent movement was just recently pulled off her plane to Israel-Palestine. During the invasion into Gaza in 2014, there were cases of some university students who were being suspended for writing papers criticizing the attack. If you look at the literature that is critical of Israeli occupation, so many inspirational voices are Jewish and Israeli. Shlomo Sand, Amos Oz, Judith Butler, Michael Lerner, Noam Chomsky, Ilan Pape, Gideon Levy, Jeff Halper, Amira Haas. We have always had resistance in our community. We have always had a vibrant counterculture. But the occupation, which is an inherently anti-democratic regime, threatens to suffocate it. This is what we are doing to ourselves generation after generation. Our past and our future is bleak and violent and stressful, and we are the side that has it easy? What is the point? We are only continuing to pour more and more resources into suffocating our Indigenous people, into making their lives miserable. And for what? We're being attacked. Are we so surprised when we are? The people who carry out attacks on the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, or against settlers in the West Bank, such attacks which I have actually barely escaped with my life, are usually young people who grow up with their schools and homes raided by armed soldiers, people who have seen their friends and family killed in front of them, who have been evicted from their homes, people from poor villages with no prospect of a higher education or a job, people who to apply for a permit to go to the beach. Have we ever actually thought about how sad it is that we are pushing young people to think that they have no other option except suicide? When I talk this to my community, they often think that they often try to silence me and claim that I'm defending or justifying terrorism and violence, but I'm not. I barely survived the attacks of my life. I'm terrified every day when I'm there. Why would I ever do that? But my point is that building a giant concrete wall would never properly address individual acts of violence or the disproportionate violence of occupation and apartheid that underlies them. A separation barrier will never bring us peace, security, or a sustainable future. Last week when I went to the West Bank, when I saw that ugly, ugly wall, and when I saw the video of Israeli security erecting those metal detectors at Al-Aqsa Mosque, I feel like my politicians and leaders have abandoned any hope for a long-term solution. I feel betrayed. As long as we continue to occupy Palestine and oppress Palestinians with a dizzying web of restricting laws and with military force, there will be no end to the violence and there will be no peace. There will be no future for me, my family, and my friends. Ending occupation is the only long-term solution. Granting Palestinians, the indigenous people of our country, basic rights and liberties is the only long-term solution. Allowing Palestinian refugees and their descendants the right to return to their land, one of the final status issues to peace, by the way, is the only long-term solution. A political arrangement for shared decision-making over our land and our future is the only long-term solution. But as I said earlier, standing here today, together, and demanding that our communities and our leaders put pressure on Israel to change is a long-term investment. Remember, it is election year. We have to put pressure on our current standing MPs and new political candidates to make addressing Israeli occupation a priority for New Zealand's foreign policy. We must keep connecting with activists and groups on the ground in Israel and in Palestine, as well as across the world, to provide a united front and show that there is an overwhelming mandate for change. We must remain strong and we must remain steadfast. A little bit of background for our organisation. Only 2 years ago, it was only 4 of us, and like our sisters and cousins who we forced to be in the organisation. But now we have around 80 members and over 400 followers online. So it's grown really fast and we have a lot of support. Not only that, but we have made connections with all of you, which a few years ago I thought was too intimidating and unthinkable a task. So I'd just like to say thank you again to everyone here. Keep fighting. Shalom and salam.
You're lumping the Palestinians in with all other.
You choose to live in New
countries.
Zealand.
You're
Why
not-
don't you
you're
choose
not-
to live in
you're not
Israel?
accepting-
Muslim countries, there's not a great
No,
example, is there, of equality?
Israel has stolen and invaded and brutally military
Assalamu
occupied.
alaikum.
For instance,
Thank you all
East
for coming
Jerusalem.
today.
United Nations resolution
We
says
didn't realise that
Israel is
tension
an
has eased a
occupying
bit in
power,
Jerusalem
and
the
that
last
any
couple of
effort-
days.
And how did it end up
and any,
People
but
were asking us
listen,
yesterday, are we still going to have this
anything
stand?
it does to alter
said yes.
the status of East Jerusalem
Yes, the tension
is
may have
null and
eased around
void,
Al-Aqsa,
and it should
but the
withdraw
occupation is still
immediately.
there.
That is
The West
two
Bank is
Security
still
Council
occupied.
resolutions.
Gaza
He
is
doesn't
still
say it should withdraw.
surrounded,
Okay,
blockaded.
doesn't.
Nothing can go in or go out.
I got carried away.
There's a human crisis happening in Gaza.
But the
no one's
fact
looking
is
at.
that it has
There's
no
There's a
right
lack of power, lack
to
of
try
troops,
to
lack of
alter the
supplies in
status
Gaza
of
right now.
Jerusalem.
Why is it the Palestinians didn't accept
does.
a two-state
We're-
solution?
We're
Why didn't they
supposed to
do
stand here today
Why don't they don't want it?
support the people who are put in
Oh, I see. Okay, so the three people.
I'll just give you a
This woman just thinks she doesn't believe in a two-state solution, so we're just trying to find out how.
the local synagogue.
Judah
to sign a totally different thing.
Okay, yeah. But the
thanks.
Zionists are actually
So
burning
why
and
is
raping.
it so many?
Oh, yeah.
So why is it?
And that's exactly what happened with Al-Aqsa. We've got a foreign occupation.